We are recording at this point. It is recording.
Okay. Alright, so I'll take the first question from you guys here.
Be careful.
Go ahead.
Alright. What was life like for those who didn't go on the Crusades?
Pretty much normal. Some people would have to pick up the slack. If a wife didn't go with her husband or something like that, she'd have to do, which women are more than capable of doing for the most part. Yeah, for most people, life just went on as normal. The lords go out, the knights go out. People work in the farms, so they got to work the farms. So they didn't go for the most part. Not a lot changed for them. All right, Beachwood.
Beachwood, what's up? Stand up for yourself.
You guys might have to yell or get the camera.
You don't have to just talk loud.
How you doing? My name is Maurice Jones, and I want to know, would you rather use a crossbow from the Middle Ages or a Middle Age longbow?
So the crossbow, the advantage is it's much more powerful, much more likely to penetrate armor, and a little more accurate over short distances. However, it takes a long time to reload, whereas the longbow, the archers would practice every day, even while not at war. And they were accurate up to, over 90 yards. They would be very accurate, and they were trained. They would have to shoot about 10 to 15 arrows in a minute, which is significantly faster than a crossbow. So I would go with the longbow.
Oh no.
I got you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
That's great body language. I don't know what's wrong with you today.
Good.
What inspired you to learn about the Middle Ages?
She asked what inspired me to learn about the Middle Ages. So when I was growing up, middle school, elementary school, high school, at first I just loved the stories of like knights and dragons and things, which dragons, unfortunately, I'm sorry, didn't exist. But like knights and kings and King Arthur, all those stories, I loved them. Then you get into school and I learned about Rome and Greece, and I love learning about ancient Greece and Rome. And then you learn in high school, you kind of just fast forward and you get to learn about World War I, World War II, American history, the colonies. Well, I was always just really curious what happened in between. Like how did the European countries develop into what they are now, because then that led to us. And how did, kings come out of Roman emperors, and how did the kings then become the countries they are now? I was just very, very curious in all of that. And so that was it, just that basic curiosity got me digging into it. And then once I found how much was there and how amazing that world is, I just loved it. I wanted to watch. All right, Beachwood.
Sam.
Yes. Hello. Wait, can you see me?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so what's your favorite technique for invading a castle? Like, if you could invade a castle, what's one way you would do it?
So obviously the most common way is just a general siege. Just cut off their water supply if you can, cut off their food supply and just wait. Eventually they're going to run out of food and they're either going to give up or they're all going to die. So then that doesn't cost you any men, it doesn't cost you your own life, and you win. But if you were in a particular hurry, and if you were a little bit later in the Middle Ages, I would probably use siege towers, because you can move those up to the walls, get people up on the walls. Battering rams were nice, but they were a little risky because you're right under the wall. So people dropping rocks and boiling oil, boiling water, arrows coming down on you. Rams get doors down, but the keep arrows so well generally. So I would use siege towers.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. So go ahead here.
Was there political corruption back then?
So you asked about political corruption. Yeah, there was tons of political corruption. That ways we have now because of different political institutions. But there would be people taking bribes. Somebody, maybe the king's sons would be taking money from other people to get support, or giving money to other people to support them to overthrow their father, or rival barons and earls trying to gain more land by, maybe giving extra supplies to people who needed them. Always people spying on each other. There was corruption. Everybody's always trying to get more power and didn't have it. Good question. All right, Beachwood.
So, I've heard that one of the reasons for the Crusades was that the Pope wanted more control over the Orthodox Church. So that why couldn't the Pope just send a crusade into the direction of the Orthodox Church and take Constantinople with a crusade? I mean, he could.
Well, actually, a good question. Kind of did on accident. So one of the Crusades, the Crusaders actually did just go and sack Constantinople. The Christian Crusaders went and killed all the Christians in Constantinople. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Although they kind of did that on their own volition. But the Pope, it's not exactly clear why he called the First Crusade. Probably for a number of reasons, but one reason why he wouldn't just go directly and attack the Eastern Orthodoxy in Constantinople is because it's still an attack on other Christians. And that's not viewed very well by others. So he wouldn't want to do that directly. But by sending a bunch of warmongering knights and lords to the east, kind of just can let nature take its course, and he knows they're probably going to do something along the way. But mostly he just wanted, it seems probably, to get a lot of warring knights who were causing problems in Europe, fighting with each other. They're burning villages and towns and stuff, get them out of there. So get them over to the Middle East, and then it also, basically the emperor of the Byzantine Empire then, Alexius, would owe the Pope a favor. So by the emperor owing the Pope, that kind of puts the Pope in a higher position now.
Thank you.
So there was a lot of different reasons why he would do it. He gave a nice big speech at the beginning, and God wills it, which he may or may not have said. He probably didn't say, but he did give a speech, and it gets everybody kind of having one goal instead of fighting each other as they've been doing for quite a while.
Thank you.
Yep. You're there.
What was the greatest invention?
So he asked what the greatest invention was. It's actually a really good question. Somebody has asked that. One of the biggest things that was invented that you probably would never think of is something called a heavy plow. So a lot of the soil in parts of northern Europe is very, very hard. Like here in Ohio, we actually have very soft soil for farming and stuff. If you've ever been anywhere in the U.S. where there's like clay or something, it's very hard to farm things. Around the year 1000, the heavy plow was invented. It's a big plow that you see them now commonly, or pictures that they pull behind animals, like behind cattle or horses. The huge wedge blade, and it just digs right through the soil. That made plowing 10 times easier for people. They could plow fields faster, more frequently, because before you'd have to wait a whole season sometimes to turn over a field. The heavy plow made an enormous difference in producing more crops and grains for people at a time when, one bad season, like a bad winter, or 2 bad winters in a row, is devastating for a population. Heavy plow made a massive difference. That's one that's often overlooked because it's like an agricultural tool and a fairly simple tool. That's a really big one. I actually wish I would have thought more about that and gotten into it. I've listed a few of them. I'll think about it in a second later. But that one comes to mind. It was really quite important. Beachwood.
If you could be in any social class, which one would you be in and why?
I would not be a peasant person. They were filthy poor. I wouldn't be the king, though. I would be probably one of the powerful, like an earl or count or something. I don't want to be the king. Everybody's always trying to take down the king. Seems like you want to be, but that's a lot of decision making, and people can't please everybody. Always having to go to war. Half the people don't like you. I'll be the guy. I'll be one of the powerful, like dukes or something, right under the king, where I've got my wealth and my social status, but I'm not hated by everyone for bad decisions. Yes. For what? Oh yeah, she asked the impacts of the Crusades. Yeah, they had huge impacts. They impacted by increasing and prolonging the tensions between Christianity and Islam. They helped in some cases, keep awareness high of a common goal. for Crusaders that there was a Holy Land that was very important, regardless of how important you thought it was before you knew about it or anything, and you know about it. Like, didn't teach much after them about it, but to them, this spiritual connection to the Holy Land was very important. But it was very, very important also for exchange of information. Crusaders and Islamic people, once the Crusades start, they had a lot of contact in a lot of different ways. It wasn't always fighting each other. Some would get left behind, some would take families in the area. And that exchange of information and goods, was the Silk Road would run right into that area from China. That exposed a lot of Europe to goods from Asia that they had never seen before. Silk kind of being one of them. But especially knowledge of sciences. The Islamic world was much more advanced with math, science, and medicine than medieval Europe was. They kind of lost track of it after Rome disappeared. So what we learned, what we based a lot of our then Renaissance and later on medicine and technology advancements were because the Muslims preserved that knowledge and advanced it far greater than any Europeans did. That contact during the Crusades enabled us to have that information, that sharing of information. Very important. Good question. Beachwood.
Okay, so I missed school yesterday, and then we learned the Crusades yesterday, and I don't know anything about it. Can you explain it to me?
I don't think he can hear you, and you never said your name.
Okay. Hi, my name is Fernando, and I missed school yesterday.
Yeah.
We learned the Crusades yesterday, so I don't know anything about the Crusades. Could you just teach us about it?
Okay, so there were like 9 Crusades. The last few were not all that big and they're kind of boring. The first few are the big ones, and what they were was basically the European Christians were going to go take back the Holy Land around Jerusalem from the Muslims. The Islamic world had control of it. The Christians, for a variety of reasons, so the Crusades began to see who could get control of the Holy Land, which was very important, where Jesus was buried or killed or born, all that stuff, all the apostles, everything that's important in the Old Testament, not everything, but a lot of it is in the Holy Land there. Both sides wanted control of, so that getting control of that was, I guess, the most basic point of the Crusades. Okay? Okay, so a question about Greek fire, how they made it and how it worked. I don't know, Greek fire was a weapon in the Middle Ages the Byzantine Empire used. We still do not know today how they made it. We have some guesses, but that recipe was lost in history because those that knew how to make it didn't write it down. They keep it secret. They would just tell the next person. The problem with that is once all those people died, then you forget. So the Byzantines used it because they had a big harbor to defend. And what Greek fire was it was kind of a liquid type substance. And it would burn extremely hot, so hot that it would burn while it was on water. Water didn't put it out. So it was good in a naval battle. You could shoot it onto the other ships. They kind of had these little pumps they would use to shoot it, similar to like a super soaker gun, except made of wood. And they could kind of eject it over to another ship or something, and it would burn. And it would burn so hot it would melt people's flesh. It would stick to people, stick to humans. It was like a sticky liquid substance, and it would burn on the water. We don't know how they made it. Most of the rest of Europe actually didn't really have the same recipe. They tried to replicate it. An extremely effective tool that defended their city numerous times. One of those things that crafty middle-aged people have up on us. We haven't figured it out. Probably had something to do with oil, we're assuming. We can get close to it with that, but well done on them, because they figured something out for that. Although maybe it's better we don't have that same thing. Beachwood, go ahead.
Hello, my name is Yang. So, where were the Jews during the Middle Ages?
Good question. They were everywhere, really. They lived in general in tight communities. They would always stay if they lived in some together. There was large communities of them in the Rhineland, which is now Germany, under the Holy Roman Empire for a long time. The Holy Roman Emperor allowed them to live there. He just charged them a little bit more tax than other people, so they paid taxes and they were protected. There were large Jewish communities throughout England for a lot of the Middle Ages. Now, they did suffer persecutions fairly often, unfortunately. there were Jewish communities in France, Italy, and then also in and around the Holy Land, Asia Minor, what's now Turkey. So they had these communities kind of everywhere. They weren't ever cohesively connected. You know, they were pretty well off in England for the most part. In the Rhineland, they stayed fairly safe. Crusaders treated them extremely poorly on their way over as they marched over the Holy Land because Jews were different than Christians. So they basically, in the first crusade, there was a peasants' crusade within it, that they would go to the Jewish communities on their way over and say, well, either convert or we kill you. So a lot of them didn't want to convert. It's their belief system. It's very important to them. So they fought and they lost, unfortunately, a lot. So, but yeah, they were everywhere. They would move around within other kingdoms. They would, you know, live, pay taxes. They had skills that they would provide for the kings. So yeah, they were just kind of everywhere, depending where they were. I mean, that's why when you get to really modern history, there's large Jewish communities in like what's now, you know, Poland before World War II, and then there's some in Austria, and there's some in England. They're just kind of spread out.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Yes.
Like so, when the king
Was in charge of the Crusades. That was the problem. Who was in charge? So, because like the first couple of Crusades, you know, the French king would go, the Holy Roman Emperor would go, the Dukes of Austria, and
It's like quiz stuff.
That's so true.
Cut out one other period like this. Other than that,
it was difficult to get organized, and that's one of the disadvantages they had. That's why they lost a couple of them. They weren't very cohesive, so everybody just kind of, there would be multiple leaders. A couple of the Crusades were a little more organized than others once they got there, but getting over there was just kind of go with you we normally follow. All right, Beachwood, you got another one?
Hi, my name's Steven. What's the most gruesome, like, torture you can think of?
Common question. Me personally, I would fire. Burning to death would be it. I wouldn't want that. That's the most gruesome to me because it's don't die from the smoke inhalation. It's the burning, which is awful. But they had all kinds of gruesome ways. I mean, they had the torture rack, and although
see you guys.
most people.
Stick around, Stephen. You can't listen to the rest of the day.
Okay, bye.
That's some of them you hear about were made up and didn't actually exist, but they did. You know, there were bad things. I saw a torture rack person. You got your arms up here, your ankles down there, and you crank this thing and pull you apart. Well, you know. It wouldn't like pull you in half. That would be. It just this one would involve your joints one by one, very slow. You crack your bones, pull your organs. Yeah, no. Yeah. Okay, so you asked about medieval leaders. William the Conqueror was probably one of the best. He didn't finish out real strong, but early on he did quite a bit. Organized, not only took England, but pretty well organized. He is responsible for the Doomsday Book, if you've heard of it. That is the first and by far and away largest, basically, census ever done in Europe. He did it. But he took measure of everybody that owned land, every animal they owned, what they grew on their land, how many slaves they had, if they had any, how many people in the family. So he knew exactly how much tax to expect from everybody. It was nothing else like that had been done in Europe. So he was responsible for quite a bit. He had a fairly successful reign. It was as far as violence and so on a little bit. He organized things well, gave out land, only kept about 20% of the land, so the rest he gave away.
I got that.
Give up for that. So he was a pretty good one. Didn't go so well in the end. He had problems with experience and kind of let himself go.
Is that how he's credited with helping spread the spread of feudalism so much? Is because he gave out so much land?
Yeah, between he and Charlemagne, I mean, there's a couple hundred years between them, but he kind of built off of what he did. But what William did, the way he set up that when he gave out the land to his earls, and they had the barons under them, and the peasantry, the knights and the peasantry, but he set up that very specific ladder, and then when he did the census of Doomsday Book, you could see, okay, this earl is responsible for this land, I know how much to expect. So it was a very organized system because then that's how you knew how to raise his military. I got to talk to this earls, get those men, and here's who they're talk to. So he had this stratified system, social system that was now written down on paper, which was an important step. It already existed before that. It was just a little more loosey-goosey in a lot of areas. So, yes.
What were like the best times for
Anytime where there wasn't a disease, there wasn't a lot. So it was probably, I would say, like year 11, states and stuff. Probably around, to be honest, probably around the time of Charlemagne. I mean, there's always wars and stuff, so you can't get away from those. There was no huge disease problem around the 9th and 10th century. Charlemagne really solidified his rule, so if you live in the middle of it, you didn't have a lot of problems with outsiders moving in. It had pretty good weather. There was actually kind of a little mini ice age at the end of the millennium. There was several bad winters in a row, and crops just grow. There was famine. The really bad famine is actually what led to the Black Death being able to be effective. Lots of people were already malnourished. So, but in the 9th and 10th centuries, there was pretty decent weather from what we can tell by taking coursing, things like that. So things, as far as living in the medieval times, that would have been so well.
I know the castles in Beachwood, which one would be best at
The ones I visited, for sure, the castle in Edinburgh, Scotland, because they built it on top of an ancient volcano, built on volcanic rock. And it's even built into the walls. There's these huge slabs, jet black, smooth volcanic rock jutting out of it. Built on top of it. I mean, this volcano's been dead for millions of years. But they built their castle on top of it. It's sharp, the rock is sharp, it's hard to get up, it's hard to climb up. They built it on top of it, it's a large area. Really easy to defend. There's a river on one side, so they have to land there. Well-picked spot by whatever king built it. It's pretty old. But you can go through and take excellent tours for the week today.
You said Edinburgh Castle?
It was a garrison for 100.
Was that Edinburgh you said?
What?
Was
Mr.
that
Holman?
Edinburgh? What castle was that?
Edinburgh Castle.
Yeah, I said that. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. Well, attacking that castle would have been a real pain. I mean, you had to. Yes. I don't know how people got Greek fire off. I don't know that they did. Spread yourself, not a lot of it gets on you. You could probably like pull it off, basically, rub it off, but then the hand's gonna burn. They better do it quick. And I don't know. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be able to see it. Yes.
Was there any way to like extinguish the fire? So like, what?
I don't know. The records aren't super clear. I mean, what we know about medieval history comes from what's called a primary source. So written records from them. Well, there's big chunks of medieval history in certain areas where we don't have a lot of them. So being a historian, what you have is like a jigsaw puzzle picture. You have a lot of the pieces. And you can see the shape you're missing, but you don't know exactly what was on that shape. So you have to figure out how to fill it in with all the other information you have. So we don't have great sources on, we do have really good sources on a couple sieges of Constantinople, how fires used and things like that. But a lot of times it's, we just hope that we find a written record somewhere or evidence how things were made, done, or handled. But yeah, so you have to just kind of, fortunately they didn't leave everything they wrote. Didn't survive, a lot of things burned, just lost. So, that answer your question?
What were the different kinds of, like, were there, like, one type of language, or were there multiple?
That's a really good question. There were multiple. So early in the Middle Ages, it was mostly Latin, from left over from the Romans. So mostly you speak Latin. Now the Germanic tribes had their own dialect, but for most of the Mediterranean, most of Europe spoke Latin. Now, a fair amount of people would have still spoken Greek as well. And then in the Middle East and the Holy Land, they spoke different jabs and like Arabic or Aramaic, still spoke different things there. But most of Europe is Latin. Now, eventually, those morphed into other languages. By later Middle Ages, you have Old French and Old English. Most people still know Latin, but then also now people are becoming Latin. And then at a certain point, everybody's Latin because they would know at least some Latin, plus their native, whatever's spoken with the region they're in. So you started getting versions of Spanish, versions of French. There were several versions of French, depending on what part you lived in. The Norse had their own language when they started getting data that gets in there. So language is actually an extremely interesting topic that a lot of people study. You get to see a lot of cool documents, and it's very interesting to see how language develops. If you ever learn Latin, you can understand so much more about language, because that's the root of so many different languages. It's a really good question. It's very interesting topic. And some languages were only spoken and not written for a long time. Right? The French dialect started off just spoken. We just broke Latin and spoke French. It's very weird. So then you have like King Richard Lionheart, who grew up and born and raised in the part of England that we consider now France. He actually spoke a French dialect. English was his second language. He was the king of England. That's sort of point. So just you get weird little stuff like that.
What percentage of people would you say like understood Latin when they were hearing their the church service and so forth? Was it pretty high?
Well, pretty high, yeah, especially early on. That would have been the main language they learned. They might not be able to know how to read and write it, but they would understand it, conversation, hearing it. Church services would have been done in Latin. For the most part, some of them still need to be Greek around the church and stuff. But yeah, most people going to church, everything was spoken in Latin until that was the language until Charlemagne was still Latin. But that's right around when languages really started to splinter. Because he spoke a dialect, I'm not exactly sure what his spoken dialect was in Latin, some version of early French. Charlemagne's collected and developed just before him. But Latin was still predominant. Yeah. That's actually a much older one. They stole that from the Greeks and Romans. It was called I remember it's called the Tartar Iron Bowl. Yeah, it was called the Iron Bowl because it's this huge bowl, big iron bowl, and it's hollow. And its mouth is kind of open, and there's a horn coming out. Well, they would throw a person in there. It was a door. They put the person in, seal them in, and they light a fire under it. So you basically cooked it up very slow. It's hot, you're touching metal, you're burning slow. You can't get out, no way out. You're cold. And then you can hear the screams out the door of the person dying. That was an awful way.
So I was telling these guys, maybe I said it in this class, there's like a Halloween store in downtown Columbus. It was called the Scare Factory, and they had a channel on history. They had a series on the History Channel, probably like 2001, and they made replicas of medieval torturing devices and actually put people in them.
Really?
And that was one of them that they made, was that bowl. Now they didn't use fire when they heated it. They used something else, and it didn't get to the point where it would burn somebody. But they actually had somebody in it, and they would have a thermometer so they could see how much hotter it got.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of neat to see some of that stuff.
That would be that one. That would be the best. I don't know how often that was used in the Middle Ages, although that one was used definitely a few times. They actually just recently found one of them, mostly intact somewhere in Turkey.
That is. Oh, sorry, getting an echo on that. That show is called Surviving History. They did the Iron Boot. They did the guillotine. They did a variety of things. It's pretty interesting to watch. But the Iron Boot one, they did cadaver limbs and put it in there and then showed the x-rays of what it did to the legs. It's pretty nasty.
No, no. That would be very, very low on my list of options if I was given an option on how to go.
Yeah.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, how were new languages formed? Like, how did people like start the new language for like whatever area?
You know, to be honest, I don't know, and I don't think a lot of linguist experts know. It's hard to see. And you can see it easier in some areas because you can see how words are so similarly related. How, you know, if I say I started whispering to you, you misunderstand the word a little bit. I think I said instead of like, I don't know, oatmeal sandwich, that said waffle fries. I don't know. Well, you know, things that you use when you speak, and then the intermingling of like the Germanic tribes and the Roman tribes and the Roman Empire, they had to figure out a way to talk to each other. So they would just work out common words and start borrowing words from each other and combining them. So it's a very slow process. It takes generations to do that. And there are people that spend their whole life studying it. It is truly fascinating. But it's very tricky. But I'm by no means an expert in that. You can find answers on that. If I had to choose, I'd be tortured. I'm probably just trying to anger the person so badly that they would stab me. Quick. Yeah, I don't know. It would be. I would just hang me or something. It's relatively quick. I wouldn't torture them all. I wouldn't do that. Some of those things are so bad. There was this big chair in one torture chamber I saw. It was just kind of like a big wooden chair, just covered in spikes. And it had straps on the arms and legs that pull you down, and then you just slowly tighten them a little bit more each day. So it pulls you further and further. I mean, there were spikes on the arms, on the back, legs, all the way down. So you're just sitting with no clothes on a spike chair. So no, they were not nice for anyone. I'm convinced, this is just my idea, that this is why like serial killers didn't exist so much back then. Well, other than getting on records. They had jobs. Like they gave these people that these really psychos just had jobs as torturers. Just kept them off the street. I don't know, there's a little bit to get after that proof. So. Yes.
If you were a peasant about the Roman War, what would you feel?
What's that?
If you were a peasant about the Roman War, what would you feel?
What would I feel? I'd be afraid. Like, war was tough for them because most peasants, you go to war, you needed at least a couple. You needed to have some sort of sword, shield, and probably you might not have any armor. You might have some leather. But if you're a peasant, you was only what you could afford. And the armor was very expensive. So maybe you'd have a spear of some sort to keep people away. But I mean, if you get a bad injury, like say I were to just get cut pretty good down my arm, and you don't go to the hospital and get bandaged up, and you pour boiling water, wine on it, cauterize it, which is heating up a piece of metal very, very hot, and putting it on the wound to melt your skin together, essentially, to seal the wounds and stop bleeding. But they didn't understand like infection the way we do, so they would get some dirt in there, just rub it out, and seal it up. They would bandage it and things like that. But I mean, if you catch a bad enough wound in battle, I mean, you have to just keep on fighting until the end. There's no point trying to go with medical attention on some of them because it was tough. It was infection in long-term wounds that would kill most people, in battles. So yeah, I would be afraid if I do boy. Would not be super comfortable if I was a peasant. I feel better as a knight, arms and things. But as peasants.
To piggyback on that, a lot of students were asking questions about what would a peasant do when their village was being attacked. Like, as soon as they would run to the castle, once they were in the castle, would they help defend the castle?
Probably. I mean, if you were in a village on a frontier area where you might get raided or attacked, most villagers, one of their things they would have a bow, would be very good archers. They spend a lot of time practicing archery, acquiring it in a certain way, actually. So, a simple little raid or something you might be able to pull off the village. But if you had to retreat back into the castle of your liege lord, if he was pulling in, then yeah, you would defend it. One, it's kind of your off your sworn obligation to do so. Also, if you don't defend it, they'll just throw you out of the castle. You're just stuck back out there by yourself. You don't want that. Not a lot of tolerance for that. But once you get into the castle, then everybody's kind of got the same goal. The castle's easily defendable. Those castles, it's hard, especially if it's just raiders types. They're not going to take the castle. It's really safe in there. They're not going to see you. So you go in the castle and you're going to listen to the military leaders. And, the danger most of the time if it's simple raids will pass. If it's full-scale invasion, we'll know the problem. Yeah, all the time. They would do it through marriage or just being geographic neighbors. You know, if you've got a lot of barley growing on your land for bread, beer and stuff. And I've got a lot of rye, or I've got a lot of pastures for sheep, cows. You don't. Okay, we're gonna make an alliance. We're gonna share that. I'm gonna give you 15% of my meat. You're gonna give me 15% of your barley. And then we're gonna rely on each other for that. So that was a good way to keep alliance, keep alive, help each other out. Marriages was the big one though. You know, I've got a son, you've got a daughter. Go.
What was your favorite part about Crusades?
I really always liked learning about Charlemagne because he was one of the first great, after Rome, one of the first emperors, several hundred years, first guy to really kind of organize things. To really start like scholastic learning, to help develop written languages, like guides, scribes were specifically supposed to write circle everything they wrote. So it's consistent. I always really liked learning about Charlemagne. Plus he was yeah, I liked a lot of it. I really liked the Charlemagne era, understanding how he did it. Just can't imagine that, you know, how did he get millions of people, hundreds of thousands of people, millions of acres of land all together, finding what he wanted. Like that show you could go to march around there and kill him, but still like he's able to do that in relatively short amount of time. And it always fascinated me how that they had to have that much personality and convince people behind it.
What was the money system like?
That varied greatly. Once we started getting into the later Middle Age, when we had English kings and French kings, we had all kinds of coins. And I've seen a lot of, they have lots of coins. You can see tons of coins. I find all-time farmers still today just take money back out of our sometimes they're very, very small, little penny type things. Sometimes they're bigger, but you can see the king's face on it. They could actually make them really detailed. And there'd be some other symbol in the back, maybe a wreath to symbolize peace, or some sort of symbolization for God, like the cross of some sort or something. You know, they would have their faces would be on one side generally. Each king would bring his own coinage. Bit of a mess for a while because Rome, for a long time, had standardized money, and then all these other kings copied up afterwards. Rome was supposed to use like you guys have this coin and this one. So it takes a while to work out. Basically, you just knew how much you had. So listen, all right, I'm not gonna be able to spend that kind of money anywhere else. You got to get to that. So you got to give me something else to trade. It was the same kind of money as I $1. But there were times they called shillings, coppers, pennies. They make like a smaller divisions. They would just chop a coin in half. Like that means you find half coins everywhere over there. Like so, you just take a coin and like, oh, I'm not paying that much. They just cut it in half. That was their way of making 20 cents and 10 cents. Next one, you grew. I'm sure it did happen. It wouldn't happen real often because, say, I married my daughter to your son. If I go attack you, it's going on. So much that. Also, if we're in some sort of agricultural agreement, I'm going to attack you. That's good. Unless I was certain I could completely overtake you and take all your land, because I don't want to use your livestock for supply. So, if you had an alliance, it was probably for a very good reason to have an alliance in the first place. You wouldn't want to break it. It's really bad. Yeah.
Was there any reason to attack them?
So not in the same way as we think of it now. There was, but it wasn't like they would look at someone and say, "You're a dark Miso," and you're different. Their notions of identity were different because they had so many years of you were either Roman or you weren't. And that was simple. You were either Roman citizen or you weren't. So then we go to the Middle Ages and it's all getting mixed up. Everybody, there's been centuries, Germanic tribes, Celtic tribes, Spanish tribes, Islamic people, Jewish people. Now they've all intermixed with Romans. So they didn't identify quite the same way you do as racism. It was more, they did, it's kind of hard to explain, unfortunately. They just identified each other slightly differently. One way would be just almost having certain first identifier. I don't remember what you look like, what's your religion. That was kind of more bigger deal for a while. And then it was just, things were they have a lot more things to worry about. So if you have 3 different people from 3 different what we consider races, they really needed each other for something, they all bordered each other, it's not going to matter. I need some of your livestock, you need my water supply. We're all being invaded by the Vikings. But it's not really an issue, because we know the Vikings are that much different. We know we're whatever this Central European area is. Unless you had somebody really different, like the Vikings, or the Longbows, somebody who's completely different. They didn't necessarily see race quite in black and white. They had more of a social idea, like European social. Doesn't matter really where you're from ethnically. I'm a lord, you're not. That was I don't want you to think racism didn't exist. It did, it's just slightly different. Anything else? You guys had any idea how long it took a knight to invest in his armor?
A long time.
Yeah, so that was like over an hour. It was not like you just hop into battle and be like, let's go. Like your squire was working on it for a while, because there'd be layers of clothes. You had to have like the layer, like basically clothes like this, essentially, underneath before the leather even goes on. Because if your armor starts rubbing on you, that's painful. Like the armor will cut into you. So you have to have padding underneath first. First layer is all the padding, there's like just rags wrapped around your kneecaps and stuff. Then you put the leather on or chain up and add it on. And one of the other classes didn't realize they asked, which is reasonable. Armor wasn't super stifling, like stiff, like going around fighting like this. Like knights when they were young, they used to armor, they dance in their armor, they do somersaults. Armor was made very, very well. Especially those before good armor. You were very movable. You had to go fight it, move and stuff. And we see these big clunky armors that they use in tournaments. That was sometimes slightly different armor. And often from much later medieval times, much, much later. But we see the armor we have now. It's actually huge bulky guys. A lot of early medieval armor was chainmail, which is heavy, but it's really good. But it protected you from slices. And then plate armor was still pretty mobile.
Alright guys, good job today, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
I'm not saying we don't stand up.